In the heart of the Niger Delta, a land rich with oil but plagued by environmental destruction and social injustice, one man dared to stand up for his people. Ken Saro-Wiwa, a writer, activist and voice for the Ogoni people, paid the ultimate price for his non-violent fight against corporate greed and government corruption. This is the harrowing story of Ken Saro-Wiwa, the Ogoni Nine, and their enduring legacy. Ken Saro-Wiwa was not just an activist, he was a teacher, a storyteller, and a visionary leader. Born in Bori, Ogoniland in 1941, he rose to prominence as a writer and television producer, using his platform to highlight the plight of his people. Saro-Wiwa founded the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, or MOSOP, in 1990. Through MOSOP, he led a peaceful campaign against the environmental devastation caused by oil exploration in the Niger Delta, particularly by Royal Dutch Shell. He championed the Ogoni Bill of Rights, demanding political autonomy, environmental protection, and a fair share of the region's oil wealth. But in a country where speaking out often meant silencing dissent, his activism placed him on a collision course with powerful interests. At the heart of Saro-Wiwa's activism was the environmental destruction wreaked upon Ogoniland by decades of unchecked oil exploration. Oil spills polluted rivers, killing fish and destroying livelihoods. Gas flaring poisoned the air, while farmland was rendered barren by contamination. The United Nations Environmental Programme, or UNEP, later confirmed the devastating extent of the damage, estimating that it would take 25 to 30 years to restore the land. Saro-Wiwa's mission was clear: to demand accountability from Shell and the Nigerian government for the ecological and human cost of their actions. In 1994, tragedy struck when 4 Ogoni chiefs were murdered during a leadership dispute. The Nigerian government, under General Sani Abacha, falsely accused Saro-Wiwa and 8 other activists of orchestrating the killings. The activists were subjected to a sham trial before the Civil Disturbances Special Tribunal, a military-controlled court notorious for its lack of due process. They were denied access to legal representation and the right to appeal. Despite international outcry, Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni Nine were sentenced to death. The trial and execution were not just acts of injustice, they were calculated attempts to silence dissent and send a chilling message to those who dared to challenge the status quo. On November 10, 1995, Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni Nine were hanged in Port Harcourt. Their execution was carried out hastily, just 2 days after the sentencing, without adhering to legal protocols. The news of their deaths sparked international condemnation. The United Nations, the Commonwealth, the European Union, and numerous governments imposed sanctions on Nigeria. Global protests erupted, and Saro-Wiwa's name became a rallying cry for environmental justice and human rights. Despite the global outcry, the Nigerian government never apologized or exonerated the Ogoni Nine, leaving a dark stain on the nation's history. While Ken Saro-Wiwa's life was tragically cut short, his legacy endures in the ongoing fight for justice in Ogoniland and beyond. The UNEP report commissioned years after his death validated his claims, providing a roadmap for cleaning up Ogoniland. Initiatives like the Hydrocarbon Pollution Remediation Project, HYPREP, and the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, aim to address the region's environmental and socio-economic challenges, albeit with mixed results. Additionally, the Ogoni people have successfully resisted the resumption of oil operations in their land, preserving their dignity and autonomy. But the struggle is far from over. Decades later, the Ogoni people are still waiting for meaningful restitution and justice for the crimes committed against them. The story of Ken Saro-Wiwa is not just an Ogoni or Nigerian tragedy, it is a cautionary tale about the cost of corporate greed and the dangers of suppressing dissent. His life and death have inspired movements for environmental justice worldwide, placing a spotlight on corporate responsibility. His story underscores the need for systemic change to protect vulnerable communities from exploitation and environmental harm. What makes Saro-Wiwa's story even more painful is the symbolism of what has replaced his vision. The land where the Center for Excellence on Environmental Research was to be built now houses a prison and a cemetery, the only federal presence in Ogoni land for decades. This grim reality sends a chilling message: protest and you will be silenced. Yet despite this, the Ogoni people continue to resist, inspired by Saro-Wiwa's words, silence would be treason. The execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni Nine was meant to extinguish a movement, but it instead ignited a global fight for justice and accountability. Their story reminds us that the arc of history bends toward justice, but only if we continue to push it. Today we honor their sacrifice and renew the call for their exoneration. It is long overdue for the Nigerian government to apologize, acknowledge its wrongs, and ensure that such atrocities never happen again. Ken Saro-Wiwa once said, "I am more dangerous dead than alive," and indeed his spirit lives on in the fight for a better, fairer world.